Welcome to the RE Source, guys. Barry is coming in hot. He's got like 20 minutes and he's got to jump on another 7 calls. So we're getting right into it. The crazy news that happened last night that kept us all up was this surprise half-point hit, mobster hit, I want to call it, from Fannie Mae. I text Barry right away. He was gracious enough to say, hey man, let's do something. I got a few questions, but I'm going to throw to you right away for just your initial thoughts on this surprise half-point hit or 50 basis point hit.
Don't like it. I think it's pretty lousy to do something like this, and the timing of it was also lousy in so many ways. So first of all, loans delivered September 1st. I mean, you couldn't give a little bit of a break. They did this intentionally, I think, with the timing because we had just we've done 4 lock alerts in the last 7 trading days, which means that now the borrower knows the rate that they have, so you cannot pass along, at least initially, this 50 basis point hit on refinances, which make up 2/3 of transactions, 66% of loans are refinances, to the borrower. So, and because Dodd-Frank really can't pass it on to the LO, so it's really a penalty. It's really a tax for companies, which I guess if you were to be flippant about it, the way that they might be thinking is, they can afford it. They're having record months. They're doing great. And just pretty cold. And why would they do this? They're doing it maybe because the FHFA wants to get out of conservatorship and be privatized. And what a nice way to pad your profits and your balance sheet into that by making now on all transactions essentially another 33 basis points. 50 basis points on 2/3 of the transactions is the equivalent of bumping up your margins 33 basis points. And they're probably figuring like, hey, why not do it? Rates are at these all-time lows. It's a gift. What difference is if it's 3 1/8, 3, 2 7/8? Who cares? People are still going to refinance. But there's some big problems I have with this. I think that the FHFA not showing or understanding that what you're really doing is putting this tax at the worst time because it's 50 basis points, and you want to try and do a 0-point loan. We know that if you had 1 point, 1.5 points on the transaction, which we rarely do, this 50 basis points would translate to roughly 1/8. But as you start to get into the par premium zone, it doesn't always translate 1/8 for a half. So you might have a penalty of 0.25% in rate. They may be just too greedy to thought of that. And then what about everything that the Fed is trying to do right now?
Doesn't this undermine them? I mean, they've worked so hard to keep rates low.
Totally undermines the Fed.
Yeah.
Totally undermines what we're trying to do in this recovery. Listen, when we came out of the recession in 2002, you know who pulled us out of the recession? The mortgage industry.
Yep.
Why? Because it was cash out refinances that did it. And the best, most vibrant part of this economy right now is the mortgage industry and what they're doing for housing and what they're doing for people with refinances, saving them money at the most important and critical time and pulling cash out so people can do things. This is such an awful decision by the FHFA. It's this tax that they're putting on it is at the worst possible time, as we had said. First of all, the timing initially, but even long term, as you just said, it completely undermines what the Fed is trying to do with the whole strategy to try and revive this economy
during
at the worst
pandemic. Yeah.
You really want to do this during a pandemic? I mean, this is greed and lack of contemplation for having empathy for borrowers at the worst possible time. Because look, initially, they're going to hurt the mortgage companies that are out there initially, but we all know that it's going to wind up being a cost that the borrower will eventually bear in the range of 1/8 or 1/4%. And by the way, Ryan, what do you think this does for types of loans that have helped people for a long time? Hey, I'm very proud of it. I brought it to the mortgage industry in the 1990s, dating myself here, when I started going on CNBC talking about no closing cost mortgages. Right. When we look at that and say, what are you doing to no closing cost refinances now by making it so much more difficult? Sometimes you could barely get enough in premium to pick up the cost of closing, especially on those lower loan amounts, right? The people who need it most. Now you're making it much harder to do a no closing cost mortgage, which was really something that was benefiting so many people.
And there's several people that get hurt in this, and I really feel for them. Obviously, lenders are going to get hit. Ultimately, consumers will pay for this. But I think it was the NBA president that said it best, like, this is our punishment for working 7 days a week since March, like killing ourselves to go out and help every family we can take advantage of low rates. And then all I do overnight is take this gigantic rake. I mean, I don't know what the math is. You and Dan and Megan are very good at quoting all the numbers. So I don't know what the collective math is of refinances right now currently locked. But if you had 800 million locked, which is very common for a fairly large company, you just got a 50 basis point tax on that. What is that? $4 million overnight that you didn't plan on, right?
Well, yeah, well, it would work out to less than that because you'd have to figure out if it's all refinance, and you'd have to figure out, where we'd go. But even if you were to say, just to break it down on the very basics of it, right, on a $1 million worth of transactions, you're talking about $500 million worth of refinance transactions. You're talking about the company paying a pretty significant price on that of $5,000 on $1 million. So on 100 million, that's $500,000. And if you have $1 billion that you anticipate in refinances closing, which is not a crazy number, that's a $5 million tax that just took place that you can't get relief from the LO, and you can't get relief from the borrower on. Now, once you close these transactions on future transactions, what I anticipate might happen is there might be pricing that's put in a catch-up mode. You know what I'm saying? To try and make up for that. So who's going to pay that? The borrower. So you're making it at least an eighth, probably a quarter worse for the borrower in most cases, and maybe in some cases 3/8 worse for the borrower on refinance transactions because of a potential catch-up period. So this is something that I think is very ill-conceived, ill-timed, surrounded with greed, just bad decisions. And if I were Jerome Powell and seeing this, what the F? I mean, it's just like, this is not Seriously. This is not in alignment with exactly what we're trying to do here. We're trying to buy mortgage-backed securities with both fists, not so the FHFA can line their pockets.
Right. Yep.
And by the way, I know what you said earlier. It's such a good point in thinking that, this. I get what the MBA said, but I don't know if it's a punishment for working hard. Nobody's going to pass the hat around. Okay, so I think that's, quite honestly, I think that's the wrong tree to bark up because, people aren't going to say, "Oh, you poor mortgage banker."
True, fair point.
You're not going to get any sympathy. That's in my opinion.
But we have been working hard, man. Our ops people are killing us across the nation. Like hair's falling out.
Right. Let's call it where that's a high class problem to have. Okay.
Yeah.
No one can have any sympathy. Okay. There are people out of work right now. So the fact that we're working hard and making a lot of money, nobody's passing the hat for you. Okay. So let's not go there because, and the MBA should know better than to go there. Okay. But what we really should do is say, why is the FHFA at complete odds with the Fed and with the general consensus of what's good for the country? That's the problem.
Good question.
The problem isn't the poor mortgage banker who's suffering, having record months. The problem is that you're hurting the consumer. That's where the real harm is being done here. The consumer is going to pay 0.25%, 0.3%, have a hard time doing no point mortgages, have a hard time doing no closing cost mortgage, and maybe now get blown out of refinancing where they really could save some money. So that's the harm you're doing. You're hurting the economy. And that's what this is all about, is that this is a horrifying decision. It's a tax which just shows that absolute authority corrupts absolutely. Well, to have absolute authority to just be able to say this so that you're in better position. So when you go to market privatized and away from conservatorship, without thinking in any regard for the consumer, is an awful thing to do. It's just awful.
Well, and it wasn't because it was risky in an adverse market. Let's be honest. I mean, they netted what was it, $2.5 billion in Q2 and only $630 million Q1. Like, come on, it wasn't because this was a risky market. There's no way that's.
Well, and not only that. Hey, listen. First of all, the real people that got screwed in this are the shareholders of Fannie and Freddie, who just got wiped out when it went to conservatorship. So I could understand if you tried to make a play and say, hey, listen, we want to do the reparations to the shareholders who totally got screwed in this deal. Okay. No, that's not happening. So this is wrong in every single way that you can imagine. But the worst and the most egregious is what it's doing to the consumer during a pandemic, hurting the people the most that need it the most. At the worst possible time in the name of greed with no justification. And by the way, not even a little runway. Not even say, hey, look, we're going to start it
Nothing.
January 2021. It's
Right.
still wrong, but allow consumers to now know that they have to get the ball rolling, allow companies to adjust for it. That would have been the decent thing to do. But to do this, where you have literally, where you have, you have to probably close something like this to make a refi work somewhere around the 26th, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
So I'm just doing the math on the top of my head, but I think that's a reasonable date that you'd have to close by. And in less than 2 weeks to get your pipeline closed, it's not going to happen. You're at max capacity anyway.
I just happened to nerd out on Ellie Mae stats. God, I'm such a nerd. But it was 47 days average closing time. So anything lock, high probability you're getting to get hit with this tax. I'll make my bold prediction. I know mortgage. I love it. I breathe it. What are you going to do if you're an owner right now? My partner, who's supposed to be my partner, just hit me with a surprise tax. I may price that in moving forward. Like, what's this guy going to do next? Because
that's the thing,
right? Like, so now I got to price in my own risk because my partner doesn't have my back. They just took a huge rake from my earnings. So not only do margins get, pushed higher and thus rates, unfortunately, but now you got to price in the erratic behavior by your partner who's supposed to be Fannie Mae.
You bring up such an amazing point. So what do you do to protect yourself? What do? You have to now think about insurance going forward because, okay, I got screwed this time. Do I allow myself to be in a position to get screwed again, or do I build up reserves to protect myself? How do you build up reserves? That means I got to increase rates or increase margin again, so that I've now built up enough reserve, probably because I want to try and make up for this big hit that I've just taken. And by the way, rightfully so. These businesses, profit's not a dirty word, okay?
Right.
Without profit, people wouldn't have jobs. So this is the type of thing where now if you're going to think exactly along the lines you're saying, which is the wise thing to do, the next time that this autonomous entity just says, I'm going to take your money away from you because you're doing well, I better build up some reserves for that, which means I got to increase margins and even worsening rates. And here's the other thing that you have to think about too, is that when you have this crazy ability to take away from you when you're doing well, where is the sympathy when things turn the other way and you're not doing so well?
Right.
Where were they 18 or 19 months ago when margin compression, people getting laid off, companies struggling? Where were they to say, here we are to help you? Okay. Where was that? That wasn't around.
I know you got to go, Barry, but I think their unofficial statement or official is Fannie Mae is there to provide stability and liquidity in the market. And this is not that, man. And so
it's a complete overreach. It's a complete overreach. It's not a good look. It's a complete overreach. And unfortunately at the present time, does not appear that there's anything that can be done about it. So my advice, if you're an originator and you're frustrated, if you're a company owner and you're frustrated, well, listen, we completely agree with you. This is awful. But once again, there's a lot to be thankful for at this period of time, right? There's a lot of good things going on. So, hey, listen, just take the opportunity that we have and make the absolute best of it and be grateful for what we've got going on, but careful going forward.
Realtors, consumers, we went fast today. So go in the chat log below, ask your questions, no dumb questions. It's just anything you want. We'll break it down for you. Mortgage people, you completely understand this. Let us know your thoughts below. Barry, thanks for zooming in and zooming out. That was a furious 10 or 15 minutes. Appreciate you, man. Appreciate what you, Megan, and Dan do for the industry. Thank you so much, man.
Well, we appreciate you, Ryan. What you do for the industry is amazing, brother. We love you and thank you. And I will make sure that I tell Megan and Dan your kind thoughts.
We're going to have them on soon, right? We'll have them all three of you on soon, guys. So look forward to that.
We tried to do that today, but they're doing some demos, so it's good. They're busy. They're doing good things.
We'll have the whole crew on soon, guys. Look forward to that. We'll put some marketing out so you guys can get prepared. See you guys next week.